Aye, 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 aye. This year is going to start off great, but until I can get my hands on the new models, let's do something else. Let's paint a Warhammer 40k Custodes my own way. Welcome, my name is Hubert, and today let's paint a Custodes Shield Captain, talk a little about striking Grime, Warhammer, and life.
But Hobus, if you want your YouTube channel to do well, you should talk about Space Marines, not Custodes.
I know.
Ultramarines is the best faction, and
you. See, I've painted Custodes in the past, but not for me. So I did them how I was asked to, with gold and red. And before I tackle my next big project, there is something I wanted to do. I don't play Custodes yet, I don't even collect them, but since I got back into the hobby, I've always wanted to try my own paint scheme for them. Silver armor, blue fabrics, red glow effects, and of course, striking Grime. More on that later. But first, let's make this model a bit more interesting with a base and copper wire. This time, I prepared the base with texture, diluted PVA, sand, rocks and cork. I haven't used PVA and sand for a while, and I think I might have overdone it. But that's good, because I want to try a new way to paint wasteland desert bases, and if this goes well, I'll make a short video about it. Then, I use copper wire to make his spear more interesting, and this time I wanted to make the lightning tendrils touch each other on a few spots.
initiates beware. Playing with tiny copper wires and super glue can be frustrating.
This process was painful. I don't know how others do it, but even with Activator, it sucked. Furthermore, for these kinds of ideas, next time I'll use more liquid glue instead of a gel one. Now we are ready to prime him black and start the paint job on the fabrics with very simple techniques.
Shield Captain is purely a martial rank and signifies the custodian is worthy of leading a force of his peers into battle.
This means this Custodes is 0.1% stronger than a regular Custodian Guard, and this brings me to talk about power creep in Warhammer 40k. I've been talking about this with my brother, who plays them on a competitive level, and as new models are released for Necrons and of course Space Marines, he was thinking maybe it's time for Custodes to disappear. With primaries introduced, what's the point? And even on a scale point of view, today they are not bigger than recently released Chaos Space Marines. They are supposed to be right between Astartes and Primarchs. Here is an example of what a true scale Custodes would look like. Anyway, let's hope they get an update soon because they deserve it. Once I'm done with the first blue coat, I start the highlighting process by dry brushing brighter and brighter blue. You might be wondering why I started with the fabrics instead of the armor, and the answer is both long and very simple. I am simple. Most of the models I paint, I approach in a way I could realistically reproduce across an entire army. These days, you see a lot of incredible painters on social media, especially in short-form content, delivering jaw-dropping results in under a minute. It's impressive, truly. But let's be honest, Try doing that for 2000 points and you lose your mind. I enjoy pushing myself, but most of the time, painting is about something much simpler. Putting color on a model and enjoying the process. And with this piece, this was the goal. Satisfaction over spectacle. Simple techniques, repeatable steps, and just one area where I allowed myself to push a little further. In this case, the spear and that red glow, because sometimes improvement isn't about doing more everywhere, it's about choosing one place to go a bit further and letting the rest breathe. You might have noticed this in my previous video about Lucius, but I always try to identify what I call the challenge spots on a model, those areas where things can easily go wrong, of course, and where I know I'll need to make deliberate choices. And it's exactly the same with this Shield Captain. So back to the question of why I painted fabric first, it really comes down to where I allow myself to be messy. I knew the blue fabrics would rely heavily on dry brushing, and that meant needing space, freedom. I also knew I could afford to be less careful with metallics at this stage, since I'd be coming back to the exposed armor later anyway. You can tell me what you think in the comments, but this time I feel like simply dry brushing the fabrics actually worked. Before sealing everything under the metallics, I prep the remaining details. Some red for the spear cord, and 2 shades of brown for the leather elements. And by the way, I just picked up these new Army Painter browns, and I think they are going to be perfect for wood and leather tones. Now, on the tabletop, the Shield Captain already reads really well, and if you are not familiar with the Custodes army rule, here is a quick reminder. When fighting, each unit can choose between 2 kata stances, opting for either sustained hits or lethal hits, Dakatarai or Rendax stances. When the Shield Captain leads a unit, he can let them benefit from both stances once per game, and on top of that, like most Custodes characters, he hits like a truck. He's not a must-have in most lists, but it's a nice alternative. Time to work on the armor, and I'll start with black metal from scale 75. I got this one for my Chaos Knights army, so I had to try this beforehand. Same process as the fabrics, really. Base coat, then dry brush, some brighter shade. I just make sure to not paint over the blue fabrics I did earlier. And this was a very satisfying painting session. Just painting Warhammer like it's meant, putting color where it's meant to be. Alright, I will let you enjoy it, and for those of you who like to watch my stuff during your own painting sessions, you're welcome to share what you're working on right at this moment.
Attention, observers. If this data stream pleases your ocular augmetics, enact the right of approval by engaging the thumb sigil to receive further sanctioned transmissions from Hobus. Bind your new sphere to this channel by subscribing. The machine god records all faithful interactions.
Streaking Grime. You know, I always struggle to find video subjects. I know what I want to paint and how I want to do it, but translating this into videos is hard, especially when not making tutorials. I want this channel to be about discovering things, trying new tools, new techniques, and getting a little better each time. Enamels were one of those discoveries for me. I first started using them while looking for ways to make my Necrons more interesting, and with a Chaos Knight army coming up, packed with new effects and experiments, it felt like the right moment to talk about streaking Grime again. Today, I'm using it in the most basic way possible, applying it generously, then shape the result through a reductive step. You've probably seen this approach before, either here on the channel or on much bigger ones, and that's kind of the point. You don't need complexity to start learning. Sometimes repeating a simple technique is enough to understand it better. There are lots of ways to paint Warhammer. I'd say miniature painting today exists on a very wide spectrum. It goes from the classic Games Workshop heavy metal style all the way to true works of art created by incredibly talented artists. And if you look closely, what I've done so far is actually very simple. At its core, it's not that different from a basic GW approach. Now I'll start working on the details, the gems, the vents, and the eyes. This time I want to try a new method for gems, inspired by a video from the Feral Painter on Fulgrim. Just grey, white, and in my case, ink instead of contrast paint. When it comes to enamel effects, there is something important I've realized about how I paint now. One of the things I care most about is depth and texture. I want my models to feel grounded, almost anchored in reality. That's why I'm drawn to special effects and why I generally prefer true metallic metal over non-metallic metal. Enamels help with that. They introduce an element of unpredictability, sometimes less controlled, more organic, more chaotic. And to me, that makes the result feel more natural, more believable. Going forward, I think my style will sit somewhere between Grimdark and the approach you see from artists like El Miniaturista, not as extreme as what you'd find on channels like Grimdark Compendium, but clearly inspired by them. The same goes for El Miniaturista. Different paths, same curiosity. And I'll have to talk about this more in the future. Finding artists to copy is not a bad thing. Alright, let's finish the model by the most interesting part, the tip of the spear. White, fluo orange, fluo yellow, and tenebrous grey. That's it, let's go. This was a small project, really, a way to explore just how simple streaking Grime can be, and honestly, it is simple. Not much more complicated than a regular wash, just with one extra step. Wear a mask, take your time, trust the process. But then the question creeps in, is that enough? Is adding a single enamel step really enough to call your miniature Grimdark? I think it is, because in the end, who decides that? As long as you enjoy yourself, as long as the process feels rewarding, that's what matters. The rest is just labels. Alright, let's take a look at the finished Custodes Shield Captain. Painting Custodes in my own way was something I'd been wanting to do for a long time. And by my own way, I mean pushing the metal away from perfection, staining it, weathering it, letting enamels, glow and imperfections tell the story instead. I'm happy with the result, and more importantly, I genuinely enjoyed almost every moment of this painting session. So now I'm curious. What's your itch? Which model or which faction keeps calling you back? I'm sure there is something that does the same for you, or at least something that makes you curious enough to pick up a brush. My friends, I hope you enjoyed this one. As always, I'll see you soon for more 40k stuff. So until next time, happy painting!